I see a little something. Is it him? Is it Jackass McWoody? Have you seen Blackfish?
Yes, I did. I did see Blackfish. For those that haven't seen it or don't know about it.
It's about the killer whales. I guess orca is the technical name of what they are. They didn't explain that, right? They didn't explain exactly where killer whale came from.
No, they didn't do that.
No. How that became a name of them. But it's about the, Shamu, I guess, is always which I'm also not 100% sure about. At one point, they mentioned, like, a new baby Shamu or something, so I guess there's been a lot of whales that have been called Shamu over the years. There's not just been one Shamu. I guess there's always a Shamu at any one time, at any generation. And I don't know when that started. I don't know what point in SeaWorld's history that started, but I guess that's not what's really important here. This is in no way a history of SeaWorld. It's a history of killer whales in captivity. It goes back to when the first killer whales were ever captured, which was in the 70s, and it goes up through. They isolate. There's a few small parks, sea life parks. They go through. But it mostly targets SeaWorld, because I guess that's the biggest world-renowned, sea life park chain there is, and then it goes into the makers of the documentary are of the opinion that having killer whales in captivity is not right, and so it just goes through all of the way that having these whales in captivity is not really great for them, and how it has resulted in various injuries and even a handful of deaths of trainers of the whales. My first thought when I was finished watching the movie was to be on the side of the slant of the movie, was just basically the ones that are still young enough that could be released into the wild outright should be released that way. The rest of them that are older and couldn't survive in the wild anymore should be released in some kind of a sea pen. I think is what they call it, or ocean pen. Mm-hmm. That's something they can devise. And so my thought was, you know what? That's fine. She's right. They should just do that, and I wouldn't really care. Do it. But that's just an initial visceral reaction to the whole thing. Then I think as a little more time passes and it kind of sinks in, and I was thinking about it more, and it did make me think a lot. It was a very good documentary. First of all,
it was very well made.
Actually really, it's one of my top. It's up there, probably a top 5 for me.
Oh wow,
really. I thought it was very good.
It was very well made. It brings up a lot of good issues. It's very thought provoking.
So it's great. The whole thing's great, but you think about it some more, and now it really just comes down to the question of animals in captivity at all.
Because you're not going to just stop at killer whales. Why would you? Well, you'd have to really extend this to all animals,
which is a problem. And therein starts the problem for me anyway, in my mind, because at first I was gung-ho, do it, whatever. Maybe I'm also a little bit more easily persuaded because personally, I've never gotten that much of a kick out of those killer whale shows, or the dolphin ones for that matter. So maybe there's people out there that those are some of their favorite types of entertainment, and those shows resonate with them more, so maybe they'd be a little more biased the other way. I never really saw it. I've admittedly spent the majority of my time in SeaWorld parks on the rides. The majority of visits I've gone to those parks was for the rides. The shows were there. I did check them out, a little bit here and there, but not a main attraction for me anyway. So it's not. So maybe I'm a little biased in that sense, or easily persuaded because the product was not something. Whether you have to mistreat the animals or not, that's debatable. To get the product of the show and the exhibits, again, I'm not that big on those exhibits anyway, so I'm not going to be a hard one to persuade to take them out. Like, it really wouldn't bother me that much.
Yeah, the thought came to my mind, I think, while I was watching the movie, was, would I even go to SeaWorld if they didn't have some really great rides? If it was just animal exhibits, if it was just a sea life park, I don't know if I would ever go. Would you?
No.
Yeah, so
I probably would have went once to check it out, and I never would have went back.
Yeah.
But
so
it's on my short list of parks that I'm going to try to hit every time I go back to Florida. And the only reason why is because of the rides.
Right. So for us,
it wouldn't be if it was just a sea life.
It's about the rides, not the animal exhibits.
Well, SeaWorld in particular, yeah.
Yeah.
So I guess that's just one thing to mention. There's so much here. This is so dense. It really is a dense topic.
Oh, sure.
So animals in captivity is the issue at hand. And my first thought was, how come... Well, the documentary has created this stir, I think. This wasn't something that was on people's minds anyway. The documentary came out. It's very well made. A lot of people have seen it. SeaWorld is a household name. Everybody knows it. Most people have been to one of those parks at some point. So it's something it's just easy to put out there and easy for people to see it. And for them to understand right away what it's all about and what's going on, and see like, wow, there's a lot of negatives here. Maybe I didn't realize this. Wow. I think one of the reasons why this is getting a lot of attention, and maybe even the documentary was made, versus people crying out for tigers in the zoo or something right now, is because of the show. Is that they're making the killer whales do tricks. They're making them learn tricks, do tricks, whatever it is, 5 times a day, every day, for shows. And zoos have pretty much abolished the show.
Yeah,
even Great Adventure abolished the tiger show.
Yeah, I guess I never realized that.
And I think they were a bigger thing when you go back, zoos go back to the 19th century.
Oh, they
more or less.
A long ways.
At least in this country. And who knows what they were doing in Europe. They had the royal menagerie, the king would have or whatever, going back centuries. But we're just really talking about modern stuff in this country, the U.S. It's gotten to a point in the zoos and even just standard aquariums where it's really just all about having the animal in something that's as close as possible to their natural habitat. But it's always like a big free-ranging area they have to roam. And that's pretty much it.
Yeah.
And then either you may or may... It kind of actually sucks more for us, the zoo goers, because it's like really a crapshoot. You may see them, you may not. Half the time they're sleeping, or more than half the time they're just sleeping. But that's what you get. Because they don't put them out on parade and on shows anymore, and they don't cart them around in big, basically jail cells on giant wheels, like I'm just thinking those old circus,
like Dumbo
trains
or something
and stuff like that, or they have like the wagons, circus wagons, and then you have the animals there.
Yeah, the only thing I can think of that might be an exception are bird shows. I'm pretty sure Animal Kingdom still has a bird show. And
yeah, they do. You will see some birds. They do the pet shows.
And pet shows.
They'll put dogs.
The other one,
dogs and cats.
Yeah,
but no one really complains about that because you do that in your house. I guess you have one and you may try to teach it tricks. Well, it's funny you mentioned Dumbo. I mean, they do have the circus still. Barnum and Bailey still exists, so there is still that. Okay. That may be the next. That's really the other thing, the other side of. That's where you have land mammals. still being trained and forced to do things. Maybe that'll be the next documentary. There's some person who tries to capitalize on the success of Blackfish will make, whatever.
Circus fish.
Circus. Black Circus or something where it's all about how the elephants and lions and tigers are all being mistreated, how it's horrible. They're being made to jump through hoops and stuff, and and then they just put into the back of a box truck or something to be taken to the next town.
And there's also horses are used in a lot of places.
Well, yeah, they're still forced to race.
Yeah, well, that's
all over the place.
I enjoy going to see a horse race, but it's pretty kind of horrible
when you think about it.
It's really bad, actually.
But so that's the whole problem with this. It's yes, release the whales, do it, but it's immediately hypocritical because what about all these other things we just brought up? What about it?
Right.
What are you gonna do?
Yeah. Well, one thing that they bring up in the documentary that they actually bring up several times is the intelligence of the killer whale. That they are an exceptional animal because their brains are so developed. So you could think maybe, well, just let the killer whales go because they're so smart.
Yeah.
They're so emotional and intelligent. I don't know. That's kind of silly to me.
You saying that's one of the arguments that they're...
I'm saying I could see an argument for that. I don't buy it.
Yeah, I know. The documentary didn't
but
exactly hammer that point home, but yeah, from the documentary you could definitely extrapolate that.
And, just another point I want to bring up before I forget it is you could also bring in animal testing into this. Testing new forms of medicine or products or chemicals or anything on animals.
Yeah, sure. Testing exploding bullets.
Oh, yeah.
Where you need just a big dog.
Yeah.
Right? Isn't that right, Beethoven?
That's right. Check out Beethoven if you haven't seen it in a while. That's a pretty dark premise to the
That'll make you want to free all the what are they, Saint Bernards?
Yeah.
No more Saint Bernards in captivity.
It'll make you never want to leave your pet at the vet overnight.
It'll make you never want to watch another Charles Grodin film.
Well,
that's for sure.
Yeah, they try and the only reason why that guy tries to capture Beethoven is because he needs to test an exploding bullet. It's really strange. Anyway.
So bizarre. Back to this, to smart whales being smart. But, well, what about the primates?
Oh.
What about, the just one rung below us in evolution?
Sure.
The chimps.
That's a really good point.
They're going to be smarter than the killer whales.
Yeah.
I mean, you can look them in the eye, and it's like...
I was just going to say that.
You can see there's something going on behind there. I mean, we know at this point for a fact that they are just one, evolutionary rung lower than us. That is us in an early evolutionary form.
Looking at a gorilla is really strange and surreal because
when you make direct eye contact,
it's just at least I think that could be me.
Yeah.
Not that there's anything wrong with that, but it's just really, I don't know, it's really interesting. It's really strange.
Yeah, it's just a few genetic mutations and, a few other, things away. And, I mean, you could go even further. What about all the animals we eat?
Mm-hmm.
What about just farms of cows, and the only reason we're breeding them and getting them nice and fat and keeping them healthy is so they can eventually be slaughtered for meat? What about that? Where does it stop? It can't stop. The bottom line is, if you take enough steps back, it just comes down to, we are the top of the food chain on this planet, and everything has to fall in line at some point with that. There really isn't any corner of this globe that hasn't been touched by a human being. There's hardly a corner of the globe that we're not living somewhere. But there's no corner of this globe that a human hasn't been at some point. So everything, we have our hands in everything. And we build a dam here, and it affects things, 100 miles away, more at some point, on some level. Everything. So, even animals in the wild have to contend with stuff we've put there, ways that we've altered the environment for our own good, and they have to just deal with it.
Yeah, more or less. Yeah.
So my point just being that there's no such thing as like the true wild. There's no way to remove ourselves from the equation, one way or the other.
True, but at the same time, how much should we limit our involvement?
Well, I guess that's the big question, or that's what this documentary is calling into question.
Yeah, that's tough.
Yeah, I mean, there's no right or wrong answer in any of this.
Yeah,
and there isn't. And we have been getting better, in our treatment of animals, because 100 years ago, every animal in the zoo was in basically a concrete cell, and they would just hit them with electric prods to make them do shit or to wake them up, because there's always a lot of people coming by that want to wake that lion up, zap it. And obviously that's not what's going on anymore. It's gotten more humane, I guess.
Yeah, I would agree.
And I'm not sure exactly where the root of that word is, but isn't that ironic that it's humane?
Yeah,
like human. It's it's our version of what we think, is best for the animals. But in the end, it's still us thinking for them.
Yeah.
No matter how you slice it. So even the people who are, the extreme animal lovers, the PETA people out there and stuff, you think you're doing the right thing, but you're still looking at it through your eyes and using your brain to try to figure out what you think is best for this other living thing. So, again, the whole thing is flawed if you really want to start looking at it like this.
Yeah, it's pretty much impossible to get away from any sort of mistreatment of animals or animals that are in captivity. You'd have to go into the woods with nothing and be completely self-sustaining to get away from absolutely everything.
So zoos have gotten better. So, and sea life, I'm sure, has gotten a lot better. Sea life parks and aquariums. So it's always been getting better. So that's just really kind of taking a bunch of steps back and looking at the whole picture.
I guess any documentary is going to have some sort of agenda behind it. I think that's just the nature of it.
Yeah, you don't really go in making a documentary, I think, unless you do.
Yeah, so the person making this one wanted to expose the treatment of killer whales in captivity.
Right.
And how terrible it is. They're not going to show both sides of the argument to that. It's just, this is terrible, end of story.
Right. They had, I think, one guy who was a former employee that was defending, but of course he was kind of he just looked like an asshole kind of thing. He just looked like, the asshole in like an 80s movie or something. It was obviously meant to just try to show how thin any argument against the agenda of the documentary would be. That was the way I took it anyway. That the only reason why they even had that guy in there. And they didn't portray any other more insightful defense.
Mm-hmm.
It took like a month, I think, after this thing came out before SeaWorld released a press release. Do you know what I'm talking about? Whatever it was. I don't know exactly when this documentary first debuted.
Sounds familiar, yeah.
But it took something like that, between 2 and 4 weeks or something. And did you read it?
No.
I read it.
Didn't.
And it was very weak. It was very weak. I don't think it defended anything at all.
Mm-hmm.
To be honest, it was very weak. So, it's interesting that I think besides that, a couple of other, and now we're getting into one in particular, SeaWorld employees, they made better defenses than the actual official PR department of SeaWorld did. Mm. So, all right. So what is this? What's her name? Do you have a name?
Bridget Pirtle? I'm not sure how to pronounce that.
All right.
She worked at the Texas SeaWorld park, and she says that the management were very open about what the killer whales were capable of. That they didn't try and hide the fact that, this is a dangerous job, you could get hurt.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, that was one of the things that all the trainers in the documentary all kind of said that. Like, oh, they never told us. I never heard about the accident.
Yeah.
Or that there was ever any accidents or anybody was ever injured. I just went and, I went in not knowing. And it could be the case. It could be that they just didn't pay attention.
Yeah.
They all kind of admit. I mean, they were all obviously young when they were doing the job. Mm-hmm. And they all kind of admitted, like, I was a kid. I don't know. I just, did what they told me to do.
Yeah.
They may have been told more and just, forgot, or they may have decided to forget because, hey, someone's paying attention to me, bringing a camera into my house and talking to me. Mm-hmm. There's always that effect. I can be famous now. Great. Because since that SeaWorld job, my life has gone down the tubes. I got my shit job that I hate in a cubicle somewhere, and now I get to be on camera, and so there's always that. I'm not saying that's definitely what happened here, and I mean I have and I think I can speak for both of us. We have no agenda here. We're not trying to defend SeaWorld now and crap on the documentary.
No.
This is just an honest discussion. This is just from watching it, my emotions immediately after, and my thought process as the last. I was about 2 weeks ago when I saw it now. So just over the last 2 weeks, my thought process and just just being able to go on the internet and find some other opposing views.
Yeah.
So and just the other side of the story, that whole kind of thing. That's all. And then I certainly don't really care either way. But anyway.
Well, just another thing Bridget mentioned was how in the documentary they say that Tilikum is the main whale that they talk about.
Yeah, we haven't even mentioned that yet.
This movie.
Oh, so much for you. But yeah, that's the main
that
whale character in the movie.
That had caused several deaths and injuries. And the documentary mentions that Tilikum's sperm was used to make a lot of other whales. That his sperm is, or his genes are in something like 50% of the whales
that are in the SeaWorld parks.
In the SeaWorld parks, yeah.
And that's a great scene, and they do just a cartoon graphic.
Yeah,
but it's
like a family
it's
tree.
Like made to be very dramatic as it like continues to expand, and you see like and that was good. I mean, I don't fault the director for putting that in there, but that was just shock value. That was just one of those you're supposed to just see it and not really think about it and just be like, oh my god, oh, they're evil. They have a known killer, and they that they let breed like this much. It's crazy,
Yeah.
But anyway, so what did she say about it? Because I know what I was thinking about it after the fact.
Well, she says that there's a contradiction there with how they talk about Tilikum, where they say that he's just a stone cold killer. That's kind of just who this whale is. That's the makeup of this whale, the psychological makeup. But at the same time, putting this whale in captivity made him this way. So she's saying, that the documentary is saying it's both nature and nurture, not one or the other. Are you born evil, or are you, or can you teach someone to be evil?
No, I don't think they necessarily make 2 points in the documentary. I think they I think they kind of state pretty clearly that because they go through the backstory, they go through when the whale Killicum was first captured.
It's not nature,
and they go through the whole reason why they think he eventually, acquired the capacity to kill due to a lot of shit that happened.
Because he had a shitty
basically
life.
Whale bullying that happened early in his life. Back when he was at that little Canadian sea life park.
Yeah.
So no, I don't think the documentary does talk out of both sides of its mouth. They talk about it being, like you said, nurture. And then the only time it's inferred that it might not be is that one scene. And that's why I said, I think that one scene was just put in there it's a cheap trick. It was just put in there for just a quick bit of shock value in that moment.
Yeah.
It shouldn't have been in there at all. It's total crap. And they just threw it in there because, I mean, that's ridiculous. I mean, I don't know that anybody, has there ever been determined, I mean, even within human beings, there's an evil gene. I mean, if someone is known to commit murder, do they then go and imprison the children of that person? Because, oh my God, this guy has the murder gene. So all of his offspring has it too now. His or hers, whatever, it could be she. Is that how we operate? Has that happened? Is every known murderer who happened to have a kid before they did the murder, the kids eventually commit a murder? Has that happened?
Yeah, I don't know.
Is that a fact? No, I'm pretty much sure it's not. So it's just silly. Again, on the other hand, could you argue because the whale Tillicum, once he did kill and it was definitively proven, should you keep breeding with that same guy, just in case, or just out of some moral argument or something, you could get into that. Maybe they shouldn't have or whatever, but that's like same thing when you with ourselves, human beings, when you have someone who when you have Charles Manson, you don't then go and let Charles Manson go donate to the sperm bank. Just in case, or just because it's, or even not that you're even afraid that any offspring he has is gonna be like him. It's just the question of like, why would you even let this guy, allow him to have his genes continue on?
Well,
when he did all his evil shit, he doesn't. That is kind of a pretty
kid.
That is a pretty it really is the greatest legacy anybody can leave. In the end. And you don't really want to give that power to someone who shouldn't, who's now been proven to do evil things and has been imprisoned, and and you're right. And then it also always in the context of human beings, because we have the capacity for all this elevated thought. You could fuck with the kid's head. Well, in the future when they find out, oh my God, who my father is.
Because
you try to avoid that.
You can try and keep it from the kid, but that's a hell of a thing to keep from somebody.
Now, in the whale world, that's not going to happen.
Right.
The whale is not going to have that elevated level of thought capacity to think that. But
the only other thing, really, that I want to bring up that this woman said, Bridget, was that the documentary apparently left out newer information and insight. I don't know what that is, but...
That's pretty vague.
But yeah.
That sounds like the official SeaWorld response. Next thing I want to bring up, though, that we haven't discussed yet. Everything we've brought up so far focuses on the whales. But what about the people? And this is, for me, where it gets a little bit more... I almost kind of want to go back to just, free the fuckers and let's just get on with this. Because... And this is also where another reason this is different maybe than other animals in captivity. And it has nothing to do with the animals themselves now. I think we've explored that from a ton of different angles. This is about the fact that people are dying. Human beings are dying. The trainers. And that's where it's kind of like is this really worth it?
No. I'll tell you right now, no.
Like, fuck the animals' feelings. I don't care whether they're happy, sad, this, that, the other thing. But how about just like from a human level and just protecting our own species? It's just, we're throwing these young kids into these tanks, and then every once in a while, one of them doesn't come back. And what's up with that? And like, that's the problem.
No, you can't keep that shit going.
And that's why, and that I think makes this more of an issue than other things in captivity, because I don't know if anyone's really getting mauled by a tiger anymore, because we're treating them
Siegfried and Roy
well enough. Well, there we go. See, when you make them do the shows and the tricks and shit, then shit happens. But if you just leave them alone and give them a nice large environment to roam and whatever, then it seems like it's all pretty cool. But yeah, I mean, you have these people are dying, and that's a problem.
Yes, that is a problem.
People are dying. Will you please shut down the system?
So then that makes me again more like, then what's maybe we should put a stop to this. So it's just the other side of it. Not even worrying about the animals' feelings anymore now, and not even giving that a thought and just looking at it. But people were dying. And there were a few other really close calls that are shown in the documentary, or they didn't die, but they, it was literally right. They were on the edge. It could have went either way. That should tell someone that something's wrong. And for me, that's what left me, even now, a couple weeks later, I still feel like upon going back to SeaWorld, I really don't want to see one of those shows anymore.
No,
it's more just that.
I'm done with the show.
It's just that, and because I'm not a big enough, just all out animal lover. I'm not a PETA type to get into that part of it any more deeply than I've already thought about it after watching this documentary. But it's just like the idea that you could be just watching another human being die. It's a crapshoot. You never know. This could be the show, or someone else gets pulled under and isn't allowed to come back up. And it's like, that bothers me. And that makes me not want to see one of these shows ever again. Because I don't feel like watching someone die and then having to have nightmares about that the rest of my life. That's not something I'm looking to have happen to me. So the only way to protect against that is to not go to the show. So that's kind of where I'm at with it, on that level.
Yeah, I'm with you.
I think of Steve Irwin.
Oh,
the guy loved animals, and he loved people, and he was a really dynamic, entertaining guy. But his passion killed him in the end. Yeah. It happens.
Just fuck with the wrong animal.
And he knew animals, a lot more. You think of all these people that have probably snorkeled with the rays, in resorts and stuff in the Bahamas and shit, and lived through it. And here's a guy who was a total expert and really knew these things. And yet one of them could get him in the end.
Yeah.
It does happen. And he was not doing anything in any kind of a park, or there was no captivity involved or anything. So there is that element of it, though, too, where it's kind of like, some people will just do this kind of stuff. This is what they want to do. They'd be miserable if they couldn't do it, because it's the only, they just feel this is what living is. And, you can't, stop people from doing dangerous things, especially when they're in their younger years. And that was a thought I had when a couple of them said, like, or maybe with one guy in particular, said, like, oh man, I was young. I had no idea. Like, I never thought about it. Like, what I was doing was dangerous, but I guess it really was. I was like putting my life in my hands every day. But it's like, yeah, but how many people could say that? Maybe it's not swimming with killer whales, but that they've done something in their early 20s that was, and then by the time you're 40, you think it and you realize, oh shit, that was really dangerous. What was I doing?
Yeah.
Like, doesn't everybody have something like that at some point in their life? It's just sort of what happens.
Yeah.
It's just life.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
It still doesn't make it right, but it's a little bit of another side, another angle, not another complete other side of the idea of death not being acceptable. I'm not saying they are, but it's just a little bit of another angle where it's just kind of, a way to feel like it's not maybe as bad, or
no,
because there is an element of these people, just taking their lives in their own hands and doing what they want to do.
Yeah,
and that'll happen too. So, but it's putting on display is the bigger problem still, where there's always incidences and they're all on video and that's nuts. That's nuts.
Yeah.
I'm really glad I watched the documentary, and it was really great, and we've already touched on that. But the real reason why I initially wanted to watch it was because it, relates to theme parks in the end. And again, really just SeaWorld. I guess now all I can think is that this could definitely have some large ramifications on SeaWorld parks and entertainment.
Yeah, we've already seen the first sign of this. Their barbecue brews and blues festival, whatever it is, where they have a lot of big or semi-big name acts or has-been acts. They come to play. A lot of the people, or almost all of the people, the artists that were signed up to initially do this, have backed out, saying they don't want to have anything to do with SeaWorld.
Right, pretty much citing, I don't know if any of them specifically said Blackfish or mentioned the documentary, but they all just kind of mentioned, we're not going to be associated with a company that mistreats animals at this level or something like that.
Mm. And, that's a big deal because that's a lot of revenue. That's a lot of money that you're losing. You have all these acts that are supposed to be big draws, get a lot of people into the park at a slow time. You're trying to boost attendance and your numbers, and it's not going to happen now.
They didn't cancel the festival, though, right? I think
no.
And I think they're getting some other acts now.
Oh, I'm sure they will.
I think they are.
It's just it's not going to be as big as it was supposed to be.
As it could have been, yeah, or it's been in past years, I would imagine.
Right.
I doubt any of the artists themselves. It probably didn't even get to them. It was just probably their PR people and their handlers and their agents all decided this for them. Like, we can't have this. We can't have our client associated with this. This will be bad press. So,
well, it was a domino effect. It was one of them did it.
Who was the first one?
Then
do you know?
Everyone else had to fall in line. Otherwise, you'd look like a total asshole.
Yeah, it was one of those deals.
So
you just had to.
Yeah.
So let me pose this question: do you think SeaWorld could survive without the killer whales?
Oh, that's an interesting question. Yeah.
No,
at this point, yeah. I think they're established enough. You mean all together?
Yeah, all three of them.
No, I mean, do you mean no shows, or they're just not even in the parks at all? You can't. They don't have any in captivity.
Yeah, I guess just all together out of the park.
All together out of the park? It's tough. I still think probably that they're established enough. People would have to definitely get used to that.
Yeah.
Because it's going to be a shocker. Probably. I don't know if the Texas park could survive. I don't know if they could all survive. I think the Orlando one could probably do okay. Especially if they start, especially if they continue to add rides into that park. Because then you can pivot to it being more of a ride-based park or an equal part a ride-based park.
Mm-hmm.
The other ones that have less rides or are in less tourist-heavy areas,
right?
I'm not sure how well they would do. Why? What do you think?
I don't know. I want to say yeah. I want to agree with you. I mean, I think, especially Orlando, could survive. The next question: do you think they will make any changes?
Yeah, I could see them getting rid of the show, the Shamu show.
See how.
I don't know if they will. That's really.
I don't think
a really
so.
tough call.
I kind of have to disagree with you. I don't think so.
I could see them doing that.
I don't think anything's going to change. Actually.
Yeah, that's probably the more likely.
I really don't
scenario.
think it will.
Because it's such a big draw that.
Yeah, I just don't think it's going to change.
Yeah.
I mean, as we discussed earlier, conditions in zoos and even these sea life parks have changed dramatically over a long period of time. But I think right now where we are in time, I don't know, I think, and based on the reaction of even some people like that Bridget P. we were talking about, and there are some people defending the situation at SeaWorld with the whales. I think at this point, people who are involved, with these animals in parks and training and whatnot, I think they truly do believe that we're at a place where we're doing the right thing, and I don't think they think we need to go any further to, release everything and, try to hit some kind of reset to before there ever were any animals in captivity. I don't know that I don't think anything's going to change here.
Okay. Yeah.
I kind of don't. I think they may see a bit of an attendance hit, maybe now, maybe for the next year or so, but I think overall nothing's really going to change, and I think they may add a little part to the show that sort of addresses a few issues, brought up by Blackfish, even try to have some kind of a, just a way to make some kind of statement to the people that come into the parks and see the show. But I don't know that it's really going to change. However, they could be living on borrowed time in terms of the next death is going to be a rough one.
Uh-huh.
So they may be fine now, but they have to really make sure that no more trainers get killed. Because the next time it happens, and especially if it happened within the next 12 months from now, when this is fresh in people's minds, this documentary, then they're fucked. Then something's going to have to change on some grand level, I think.
Yeah, well, at the end...
You can imagine? I mean,
yeah.
The way it is right now, it's like they can kind of sustain this and make it work, but a trainer dies, next month. Holy shit.
Well, that's
what I'm saying.
Soon? Yeah.
Then they're fucked. So that's the thing. They do have to do something, protect their trainers better. I think the film said that.
Well,
that's part of the end, right?
At the end of the documentary, they
said that
say
OSHA ruled initially in a case that the trainers are no longer allowed to be in the pools with the whales during the shows.
Yeah.
But
they're
still doing it, and they're in an appeal process right now. SeaWorld appealed, and so as long as they're in appeal, they can still do it.
I don't know where that would apply, though, exactly. Is that just SeaWorld Orlando? Is that just Florida? Is that...
Oh, based on what court that went to? I don't know. I don't know if it was a
so
federal
it's like, I don't know
case or
where
not.
that would apply.
Yeah, I don't know either, but that's their problem. It's just they gotta make sure no one else gets hurt.
If enough time goes by before the next,
but if it's
before the next death,
if it's 10 years out,
nobody's.
If it's
gonna
8 years
remember.
out, then it's not gonna matter.
Yeah,
everything resets. I don't want to see the parks close though. At least Orlando. I mean, it's got a couple of really great rides. We can't lose Manta.
No, Manta.
That would be a crime. I mean, Kraken even is like, I could go either way, but
yeah,
if only for Manta, save Manta.
Yeah.
Although maybe then they'll move it to Bush Williamsburg.
Right, where it should have gone.
Tear
in the
down
first place.
Verbolten and put Manta in, and then it'll be all set. And I definitely don't. I mean, I just said how I don't think anything's even going to change really. So I'm not predicting that the parks they'll have to close the SeaWorlds, due to this. But there is still X factors out there. We talked about another death could happen in a short amount of time, and things could get more dicey for them. Yeah, but even as a hypothetical, just the fact that the documentary brings up this hypothetical that well, what if they were ordered, court order to clear out all the killer whales, and the dolphins, and then that drove attendance down so much that the park had to close. I would hate to lose those rides.
Yeah, I think one of the important things to take away from this is to just not be ignorant. Educate yourself and try to know what's going on.
Yeah, well said. Well, yeah, I mean, even to in this situation specifically, it's easy to just go to a sea life park and be ignorant and just watch the show and cheer and be like, oh, yay, and then buy the stuffed animal of the whale on your way out, or a shirt or something, and never think about anything that may be going on behind the scenes, or, you know, how those whales got there in captivity in the first place. So something like this documentary could educate you so you're not completely ignorant about, you know, both sides of the coin. There's a real upside. It's fun entertainment. You get educated about the whale. There's, you know, there's preservation efforts, and there's a lot of knowledge we gain through research of how, when you have animals like this in captivity. But there is also, you know, a little bit of a dark side with this. It just comes with the territory, and it's not a bad thing to be aware of that and learn about that. But then, you know, just to watch the documentary is that's you could say the same thing. It's also easy to be ignorant and just watch a documentary and just totally buy into everything that documentary says and every bit of the agenda that they're putting out without thinking for yourself a little bit at the end.
Right.
And you don't want to do that either. You don't want to just drink the Kool-Aid and just buy into everything that one source is putting out without looking into some other sources and, you know, comparing and contrasting and figuring out for yourself in the end what your final opinion is going to be. So, yeah, that was very preachy. That was a very preachy ending.
Yeah. Serious but good.
Short, but pointless.
Thanks for riding. Hey guys, we'd love to know what you think. Post a comment or question on thanksforwriting.tumblr.com, or you can email us at thanksforwriting@yahoo.com. We're on Facebook too.
Facebook, a thrilling website for over 100 years.